I used to believe love meant sacrifice, that giving up parts of yourself for someone else was just part of the deal. But over the years, those sacrifices became expectations, and those expectations became obligations, until there was nothing left of me that hadn't been shaped by her demands. I was a stay-at-home father, a role I took on willingly when Madison's career took off. I handled everything: cooking, cleaning, school runs, making sure she had nothing to worry about when she came home. And yet, in her eyes, I was never enough. While you're here, leave a comment and let me know where you're watching from. I'd love to know. Ryan, do you really wear that out in public? She sneered one morning as I grabbed my jacket. You look like a substitute teacher who gave up on life. I forced a chuckle, thinking she was joking. But when I met her gaze, there was nothing playful about it. Just thinly veiled contempt. That's how it always was. Small, cutting remarks, each one designed to chip away at whatever confidence I had left. At first, I ignored them. I told myself she was stressed, that the pressures of her job were getting to her. But over time, I noticed how different she was around other people. Around friends, colleagues, even strangers, she was charming, full of laughter and warmth. But the moment we were alone, the mask slipped. I became her favorite punching bag, the target of her passive-aggressive jokes. It hit me hardest at family gatherings. Thanksgiving at her parents' house was the worst. That year, I had spent the entire day helping set up, cooking alongside her mother, making sure our son was entertained. When dinner was finally ready, I sat down, exhausted but satisfied. Madison raised her wine glass and smirked. A toast to my husband, who gets to live every man's dream. Staying home all day, watching TV, and living off my paycheck. Laughter erupted around the table. My stomach clenched. I looked around, expecting someone, anyone, to defend me. But they just chuckled, raising their glasses. My face burned. Madison, I said quietly, forcing a smile, that's not exactly fair. She waved a dismissive hand. Oh, come on, don't be so sensitive. We all know I'm the one keeping this family afloat. My grip tightened around my fork. I wanted to tell her how much I did. That while she was out to fancy business lunches, I was scrubbing floors, helping our son with homework, making sure she had a hot meal waiting when she got home. But I knew it wouldn't matter. If I defended myself, I was overreacting. If I stayed silent, I was too weak to handle a little joke. After dinner, her father pulled me aside. Don't take it personally, son, he said with a chuckle. Madison's always been a little sharp-tongued. I nodded, pretending it didn't bother me. But that night, lying in bed beside my wife as she scrolled through her phone without a care in the world, I felt something shift inside me. It wasn't just anger or hurt. It was the realization that I had let this go on for far too long. I turned my head slightly. Do you even respect me? She sighed. Oh, here we go. No, I pressed. I want an answer. She locked her phone and set it on the nightstand, turning to me with an exasperated expression. Ryan, if I didn't respect you, I wouldn't be here, would I? That answer wasn't enough. It never was. And as I stared at the ceiling, listening to her drift off to sleep, I made a promise to myself. This wasn't how my life was going to be. The breaking point didn't come in some grand explosion of rage. It came in quiet moments, small humiliations that stacked up like bricks in a wall I couldn't escape. The night that finally shattered the illusion was supposed to be a simple dinner with friends, Madison's friends, to be precise. I had never quite fit in with them. They were all polished professionals, people who talked about stock portfolios and luxury vacations while I sat there, stirring my drink, pretending I belonged. We were at a sleek downtown restaurant, the kind where the lighting was dim enough to make everyone look flawless, where the plates were more decoration than food. Madison sat across from me, her laughter cutting through the chatter as she leaned into a conversation with her colleague, Ethan. He was the kind of guy she used to roll her eyes at, cocky, self-assured, the type who never had to try too hard because life had already handed him everything. But tonight, she hung on his every word. So, Ryan, Ethan said, turning his attention to me with a smirk. What do you do again? The way he asked it, like he already knew the answer but wanted to hear me say it out loud. Madison jumped in before I could respond. Oh, Ryan has the most stress-free job in the world, she said, laughing as she took a sip of her wine. He stays home and makes sure the house doesn't burn down. Tough gig. Huh? Laughter rippled around the table. I felt it like a slap. I forced a smile. Yeah, well, someone has to keep things running while Madison's out changing the world. It was meant to be lighthearted, but Madison wasn't done. You know, sometimes I think he forgets what a real job feels like, she said, shaking her head. I mean, how hard is it to fold laundry and heat up mac and cheese? The laughter came again, louder this time. Even the waiter, setting down plates in front of us, had the nerve to smirk. My grip on the fork tightened. I swallowed back the heat rising in my throat. Madison, I said, my voice quieter than I wanted it to be. That's enough. She tilted her head, feigning innocence. Oh, come on, don't be so sensitive. It's just a joke. That was always her excuse. Just a joke. Just teasing. Just me overreacting. I looked around the table, waiting for someone to step in, to change the subject, to acknowledge that maybe, just maybe, they were laughing at something cruel. But no one did. Because to them, I wasn't a person worth defending. Something inside me snapped. I set my fork down, leaned back in my chair, and let out a slow breath. You know, Madison, I said, my voice steady now, louder. It's funny how you call it a stress-free job. Because last time I checked, while you were out to business dinners, I was handling everything. I cook. I clean. I take care of our son. Make sure he's fed, bathed, homework done. I do the grocery shopping, the laundry, the repairs when something breaks. And while I'm doing all that, I also make sure there's a meal on the table for you when you waltz in at 10 at night, exhausted from networking. The table went quiet. Ryan, Madison hissed, her face tightening. Not here. No, I said, standing up. Right here. Because apparently, it's hilarious to mock me in front of your friends. But let's be real, Madison. You couldn't handle my job for a single day. You think you work hard? Try being the one who holds everything together while getting laughed at for it. The silence stretched. Ethan shifted uncomfortably. Someone cleared their throat. I let my gaze sweep over the table, taking in the discomfort, the forced smiles. It was the first time I had ever spoken up, and for the first time in years, I felt something other than helplessness. I felt power. Madison glared at me, her lips pressed into a tight line. Ryan, sit down. No, I said, grabbing my jacket. I'm done being the punchline. I turned and walked out, leaving behind the stunned silence, the uneaten food, the weight of years of humiliation. For the first time, I didn't care what they thought. And for the first time, I wasn't sure if I would ever go back. After walking out of that dinner, I expected Madison to come after me, to call or at least send one of her passive-aggressive texts. But she didn't. I waited. Nothing. That silence should have been my first clue. When I finally got home, she was already asleep, or at least pretending to be. I stared at the ceiling for hours, replaying everything in my head, that laughter ringing in my ears like a wound that wouldn't close. I told myself I'd let it go, that this was just another fight, that things would go back to normal. But normal wasn't what it used to be. The next morning, she acted like nothing had happened. She was all smiles, coffee in one hand, phone in the other, tapping away at messages before work. You really embarrassed yourself last night, she said without looking up. I almost laughed. Yeah? I thought I embarrassed you. She scoffed. Please. No one takes you seriously. You stormed off like a child. I clenched my jaw, but I didn't take the bait. Instead, I watched her. The way she barely looked at me. The way she grabbed her coat and left with barely a goodbye. It wasn't just that she didn't care about what had happened. It was that she didn't care about me. And maybe she hadn't for a long time. That feeling sat in my gut all day. A slow, nagging itch at the back of my mind. That night, when she got home, I watched her more closely. The way she kept her phone face down on the counter. The way she was always too tired for any real conversation. The way she went to bed before me, scrolling through her screen with a faint smile. Who was she talking to? The next day, I decided to do something I never had before. I checked her phone. It wasn't easy. Madison was careful. She always had a passcode, always kept it close. But that morning, she left it unlocked for a split second when she went to grab her keys. I hesitated only for a second before swiping into her messages. My stomach twisted. The name wasn't one I recognized. Just C. No last name. But the messages made my blood run cold. Last night was perfect. Can't stop thinking about it. Wish we had more time. Can't wait for this weekend. He doesn't suspect a thing, right? I stared at the screen, my pulse hammering. There was nothing explicitly damning. No pictures, no I love you. Nothing I could shove in her face and demand answers for. But I knew. I knew. A noise behind me made me lock the phone and set it down fast. Madison walked in, grabbing her coffee like nothing was wrong. You good? She asked, raising an eyebrow. I forced a smile. Yeah, fine. But I wasn't. For the next few days, I couldn't stop thinking about it. About C. About the messages. About how easy it had been for her to humiliate me in front of her friends because maybe, just maybe, she needed to justify what she was doing behind my back. I started watching more carefully, piecing things together. The extra work meetings, the sudden obsession with going to the gym, the way she always showered the second she got home. And then I found it. I was putting away laundry when I saw the small black box in the back of her closet. A gift box. Not wrapped, but neat. Tucked away as if she hadn't decided what to do with it yet. My chest tightened as I pulled it out, flipping open the lid. Inside was a sleek, expensive-looking watch. Definitely not my style. Definitely never meant for me. I stood there for what felt like forever, staring at it, feeling something inside me crack. I could hear her voice in my head, mocking me. Ryan, sit down. Ryan, don't be so sensitive. Ryan, no one takes you seriously. I snapped the box shut and shoved it back where I found it. My hands were shaking, but not from sadness, from rage. So this was it. Proof. Maybe not enough to take to a divorce lawyer, but enough for me to know. Enough to stop doubting myself. Enough to start planning. I wasn't going to cry. I wasn't going to beg. I wasn't going to let her turn this around on me. No, I was going to make her regret every second of this. The watch sat in the back of Madison's closet like a loaded gun, waiting for the right moment to go off. I kept thinking about how she must have picked it out, carefully choosing the right one, picturing his wrist, picturing his reaction. That thought burned inside me, but I didn't lose control. Not yet. If I confronted her now, she'd just lie, spin it around, make me the bad guy. No, I needed more. I needed to be sure. That night, I acted normal. I joked about work. I asked her about her day. I played the fool while she scrolled through her phone, barely looking up. Busy week coming up? I asked. She shrugged. Yeah, work's a mess. Probably late nights. You know how it is. I knew exactly how it was. The next day, while she was at work, I started putting my plan in motion. First, I made sure the house cameras were working. She thought they were only for security, but they do just fine for my purposes. Next, I went back to that watch. I could have smashed it, thrown it in the trash, but that would be too obvious. Instead, I got creative. I took it out of the box, placed it neatly on the dresser, and added a small note. I know. Then, I waited. Madison got home late, as expected. She was all smiles, chatting on her phone as she walked in. I stayed in the living room, pretending to read. I heard her footsteps go down the hall, then stop. Silence. I imagined her standing there, staring at that note, her pulse picking up. A few minutes later, she walked into the living room, casual, too casual. Did you go through my stuff? I looked up. What are you talking about? Her eyes narrowed. In my closet. You were snooping. I set the book down, pretending to be confused. I was putting away laundry. Something wrong? She hesitated. No, I had something in there. A gift. I was going to surprise you. She was good. I had to give her that. I raised an eyebrow. A gift? She forced a laugh. Yeah, but since you ruined the surprise here. She disappeared down the hall and came back holding the watch. Happy early birthday. I looked at it, then back at her. She was testing me, seeing if I'd take the bait. I smiled. Wow, it's nice. But you know I don't wear watches. She faltered for just a second, then recovered. I thought maybe you'd start. Thought it would look good on you. I took it, turning it over in my hands. It was too sleek, too modern for my taste. This wasn't meant for me. You really didn't have to, I said, placing it on the coffee table. But thanks. She exhaled, relieved. She thought she'd won. For the next few days, I played it cool. I needed time to gather proof. So I checked the home cameras when she wasn't looking. I tracked her car's GPS, something I'd never done before, but desperate times called for desperate measures. And then, just when I was wondering how much longer I'd have to wait, an opportunity fell into my lap. Madison mentioned a work retreat over dinner. It's this weekend, she said, barely paying attention as she scrolled through her phone. Just a couple of days, team-building stuff. Sounds fun, I said. She smirked. Doubt it. Just a bunch of boring meetings. I nodded, sipping my drink, pretending to believe her. That night, I checked the GPS logs on her car. Sure enough, there was no work retreat. But there was a ski resort reservation under her name. 2 people. 1 room. I stared at the screen, breathing slowly. This was it. The proof I needed. She was going away with him. I could have confronted her right then and there, but I wanted more. I wanted to see it, to catch her in the act. So I made my own reservation, and I planned my revenge. The drive to the resort was quiet, the kind of quiet that feels like the air before a storm. Madison was in a good mood, humming along to the radio as she texted on her phone. Probably him. I kept my grip steady on the wheel, eyes on the road, mind racing ahead to what I knew was coming. Excited for your work retreat? I asked casually. She glanced at me, barely hiding a smirk. Yeah, should be a nice little break. You sure you'll be okay on your own? I forced a chuckle. I think I'll manage. She didn't know I had a bag packed in the trunk. She didn't know that, after I dropped her off at the resort, I had no intention of leaving. We pulled into the circular driveway of the Aspen Lodge, the kind of place that reeked of wealth and exclusivity. Madison leaned over, kissing my cheek. I'll text you when I get settled. Of course, I said, watching her step out, her boots crunching against the snow. I waited until she disappeared inside, then drove down the road, parked my car in a nearby lot, and checked into my own room under a different name. The whole place was buzzing with tourists, couples in designer ski gear sipping hot cocoa by fire pits. Somewhere in this crowd, Madison was meeting him. I spent the next hour watching, waiting. Then, I saw them. She was with him, the ski instructor. Younger than me, fit, blonde hair tousled just enough to look effortless. They were laughing, walking through the resort like they didn't have a care in the world. My stomach clenched, but I stayed put. Not yet. They headed toward the gondolas, the ones that carried skiers up the mountain. I kept my distance, slipping into the line behind them, pulling my hood up. The gondolas were enclosed, private. It was the perfect place for them to be alone. And it was the perfect place for me to catch them. The ski lift operator smiled at them as they stepped inside. Private ride. Huh? Enjoy the view. Oh, we will, Madison giggled, and they disappeared inside. I moved quickly. The control booth was just a few steps away, tucked near the lodge. A few words with the right person, a quick exchange of cash, and suddenly, I had access to the resort's loudspeakers. The gondola jerked to a stop mid-air. Skiers below looked up, pointing. The resort staff scrambled, confused. And then, my voice filled the mountains. Attention, Aspen guests. We have a very special announcement. There was a pause. Then I continued, my voice smooth, controlled. Madison Carter was supposed to be on a work retreat, but instead, she's in gondola number 7 with her ski instructor, warming up in ways her husband was unaware of. Laughter rippled through the resort. People pulled out their phones, snapping pictures, recording the moment. I could only imagine what was happening inside that gondola. The panic, the fear. The staff rushed to restart the lift, but the damage was done. By the time Madison and her lover reached the top of the mountain, there was nowhere to hide. People were watching, whispering, pointing. She stumbled out, face red, eyes darting around. Then she saw me. She opened her mouth, but I was already walking away, heading back to the lodge, done with her lies. I had exposed her, and now she had to live with it. I walked through the lodge with my head high, letting the warmth from the grand fireplace soak into my skin, but there was no comfort in it. My heart still pounded, adrenaline still coursing through me from what I'd just done. Madison was still up there, stranded at the top of the mountain with nowhere to run. And I wanted her to feel it. The humiliation, the isolation, the cold bite of knowing she had been caught. I made my way back to my room, locked the door, and sat on the edge of the bed. My phone vibrated on the nightstand, over and over again. I ignored it at first, but the messages kept coming. Madison, where are you? What did you do? Ryan, this isn't funny. Fix this now. People are staring at me. I swear to God, you are going to regret this. Answer me. I smirked. She was unraveling. After about an hour, the messages stopped. I figured she was either too busy trying to spin her way out of it, or she had finally gotten back down the mountain. Either way, she'd have to find me. And she did. A hard knock on my door. I didn't move at first, just listened. Another knock, harder this time. Ryan, open the door. I let a beat pass. Then I stood, exhaling slowly before pulling it open. She stormed in, cheeks flushed, coat half off her shoulders like she had rushed here in a fury. What the hell was that? I shut the door behind her and leaned against it. What part? Her eyes flared. Are you seriously playing dumb right now? Do you have any idea how humiliating that was? Everyone was laughing. People were recording. I crossed my arms. Good. Now you know how it feels. She faltered for half a second, just long enough for me to see the panic behind her anger. Then, she straightened. This is insane, Ryan. You stopped a ski lift. You embarrassed me in front of an entire resort. And for what? Because of some stupid misunderstanding? I laughed, shaking my head. A misunderstanding? Is that what you're calling sneaking off with your ski instructor? I know everything, Madison. I know how long this has been going on. I know every lie, every excuse. She scoffed. You're being ridiculous. I stepped closer. Then say it. Say you weren't with him. Say you weren't in that gondola doing exactly what we both know you were doing. Her mouth opened, then closed. That tiny hesitation told me everything. She swallowed hard. Ryan, we can talk about this. I talk? Now you want to talk? I shook my head. Where was this conversation when you decided to cheat? When you lied to my face every single time you told me you loved me? Tears welled in her eyes, but I knew better. These weren't tears of regret. They were tears of getting caught. Ryan, please. You just what? I cut her off. Thought I'd never find out? Thought I'd keep being the fool who trusted you? Thought you could keep lying to my face while sneaking around with him? Her jaw tightened. This doesn't have to end like this. We can fix this. I let out a cold chuckle. There's no we anymore. I walked past her, grabbed my bag from the closet, and slung it over my shoulder. I already checked out. My flight home is in the morning. She stared at me, lips parted like she couldn't believe what was happening. You're leaving? You left first, Madison, I said, voice steady. You left the second you decided I wasn't enough. For the first time, she had nothing to say. I stepped past her, pulled the door open, and walked away without looking back. The moment I landed back home, I wasted no time. Madison had spent our entire relationship assuming she held all the cards, that no matter what she did, I would always be there, playing the role of the devoted, trusting husband. She was wrong. This time, I wasn't reacting. I was preparing. I made my way straight to my lawyer's office. I hadn't even gone back to our house, my house. That was her battlefield, filled with her carefully crafted manipulations and the memories she thought would make me hesitate. I wasn't hesitating anymore. My lawyer, Greg, leaned back in his chair, scanning the documents I had laid in front of him. You came prepared. I've had time to think, I said, my voice steady. I want a clean break. No drawn-out fights, no second chances, no discussions. I have evidence of her affair, and I want to use it. Greg smirked. You're one of the rare ones. Most guys in your situation hesitate, let emotions cloud their decisions. I shook my head. Not anymore. She made her choices. Now I'm making mine. Greg nodded. All right. We'll file immediately. You'll serve her with divorce papers by the end of the week. With proof of infidelity, we can push for favorable asset division. Do you want to fight for the house? I thought about it. The place we had built together. The home I once thought would be filled with love, a future. Now, it felt tainted. No, I said. Let her keep it. I don't need reminders of what she ruined. Understood. And the joint accounts? Already taken care of. I separated my finances before the trip. She won't have access to my money. Greg smiled. You really aren't playing around. No, I said, exhaling slowly. I'm not. Serving Madison the papers was the part one was looking forward to the most. She had been trying to call me nonstop since I left Aspen, leaving voicemails filled with forced apologies and half-baked excuses. I ignored them all. When she finally sent a message saying she was coming home so we could fix this, I smiled to myself. Perfect timing. I made sure I wasn't there when she arrived. Instead, she was greeted by a process server the moment she stepped onto the porch. Security cameras caught everything. The moment she opened the door, expecting to see me, only to be handed the envelope. The way she read the papers, her expression twisting from confusion to panic to rage. She threw the envelope onto the ground, screamed something at the process server, then stormed inside. I watched the footage from my phone, leaning back in the chair of my new apartment. She could rage all she wanted. There was no undoing this. Minutes later, my phone lit up. I answered this time. You filed for divorce? Her voice was sharp, breathless. Yeah, I said calmly. Did you think I wouldn't? You didn't even talk to me. I laughed coldly. Talk to you? Like you talked to me before sneaking off with your ski instructor? She hesitated. Ryan, I made a mistake. No, I cut her off. A mistake is forgetting to pick up milk from the store. What you did, that was a choice. Over and over again. She huffed, shifting tactics. You're just being emotional. You're throwing away everything we built together over one bad decision. One bad decision? I repeated, shaking my head. You were lying to me for months, Madison. How many times did you go to him? How many times did you come home, look me in the eye, and pretend nothing was wrong? Silence. That was all the confirmation I needed. I'm done, I said. The papers are filed. The accounts are separated. I've moved out. There's nothing left to talk about. You can't do this to me. She snapped. You can't just walk away. I smirked. I already did. And then I hung up. I stepped into my new apartment, a modest one-bedroom with a view that overlooked the city skyline. It wasn't as grand as the house Madison and I once shared, but for the first time in years, it was mine. No traces of her. No memories of whispered lies. Just a fresh start. The silence was unfamiliar but welcome. No passive-aggressive sighs. No condescending remarks disguised as jokes. Just me. I had spent so much time wrapped in Madison's world, suffocated by her expectations and judgments, that I had forgotten what my own voice sounded like when it wasn't being drowned out. I dropped my bags and sat on the couch, exhaling deeply. The divorce proceedings were moving forward. Madison had, of course, tried to fight it. First, she played the victim. Then she tried to manipulate me into staying. When that didn't work, she went for threats, legal action, financial ruin, social destruction. None of it worked. I had prepared too well. My lawyer, Greg, had been amused by her attempts. She's scrambling, he had told me during our last meeting. She thought she could control the narrative. Now she's realizing she has nothing to hold over you. I had smiled at that. Madison had always thrived on control. Watching it slip through her fingers must have been unbearable. Still, part of me wondered how she was handling it all. Not because I cared, but because I knew the woman I married. She wasn't built for consequences. A week later, I got my answer. I was sitting at a cafe, enjoying my morning coffee when a mutual friend, Jason, slid into the seat across from me. He had that look, the one people get when they have news. She's not taking it well, he said, stirring his drink. I didn't react. That's so? Jason smirked. Oh yeah, she's been telling anyone who will listen that you're ruining her life. Word is, she thought you'd fold and beg her to come back. I let out a low chuckle. She really believed that? She did, Jason nodded. And now? She's miserable. The ski instructor? Turns out he's not interested in playing house. He was fine with sneaking around, but the moment she wanted more, he bailed. I didn't know why that made me feel so satisfied, but it did. Maybe it was because, deep down, I knew Madison wasn't looking for love with him. She was looking for an ego boost, a way to feel desired without the effort of maintaining a real relationship. She's trying to move on fast, Jason continued, going out every night, pretending she's living her best life. But people see through it. She's unraveling. I sipped my coffee, feeling no pity. She wanted freedom. Now she has it. Jason shook his head. Yeah, but she didn't expect this kind of freedom. She thought she'd be the one walking away, leaving you in pieces. Instead, she's the one left behind. Good. A few days later, she called me. I let it ring, debating if I should pick up. Against my better judgment, I answered. Ryan. Her voice was softer than usual, lacking its usual edge. Can we talk? I leaned back. About what? She hesitated. Everything. I know I made mistakes. I scoffed. Mistakes? I mean it. She rushed on. I wasn't thinking. I got caught up in something stupid, and I didn't realize what I was throwing away. She took a deep breath, steadying herself. I miss you. There it was. The inevitable attempt at rewriting history. You don't miss me, I said flatly. You miss control. You miss having someone to take care of everything while you pretended to be the perfect wife. But that's over. I do miss you, she insisted, her voice cracking. Can't we at least try to fix things? I exhaled slowly. Let me ask you something, Madison. If I hadn't caught you, if I hadn't humiliated you, would you still be here, saying this? Silence. I nodded to myself. That's what I thought. You're making a mistake, she whispered. We could still be something. I smiled to myself, finally feeling nothing but indifference. We already were. And now? We're nothing. I ended the call. I didn't block her. I didn't need to. Because for the first time in years, I wasn't waiting for her to change. I had already moved on. And I wasn't looking back. I woke up to the sound of my alarm, but for the first time in years, it wasn't an unwelcome noise. It wasn't Madison nudging me awake to do something for her. It wasn't the weight of expectation dragging me down before I even stepped out of bed. It was just me, waking up to my life, on my terms. The sun filtered through the blinds of my new apartment, casting soft golden lines across the walls. The place was small, but it was mine. It wasn't filled with Madison's clutter, her designer furniture, or reminders of what I had lost. Instead, it was a reflection of what I had gained, peace. I had spent the past few months rebuilding, piece by piece. The divorce had been finalized, the settlement heavily favoring me thanks to the overwhelming proof of her affair. Madison had fought tooth and nail, trying to spin the story in her favor, but in the end, facts were facts. She cheated. She lost. And now? She was struggling. A few weeks ago, Jason had filled me in over drinks. She's a mess, he had said, shaking his head. Tried getting back into the dating scene, but guys aren't falling for her act anymore. Word got around fast. She's not the desirable, untouchable woman she thought she was. She's just another divorcee who threw away a good thing. I had smirked at that, not because I was petty, but because karma had finally caught up. Madison had spent years believing she was above consequences, above responsibility. Now, reality had hit her harder than she ever expected. She tried getting the ski instructor back, Jason continued, laughing into his beer. But he's already moved on. Guess he didn't sign up for the full-time role of Madison's new caretaker. I wasn't surprised. He was just a thrill for her, an escape from responsibility. But now that she had nothing left to fall back on, she was desperate to cling to anything stable. I wasn't that person anymore. Work had been going well. Without Madison constantly belittling my ambitions, I had finally pushed forward with my plans. I had picked up freelance projects, reconnected with old colleagues, and even started laying the groundwork for my own business. It was still early, but for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was going somewhere instead of just treading water. Even my social life had changed. People who had once dismissed me as Madison's husband were now seeing me as my own person. I had friends again, people who valued me rather than just tolerated my presence. And there was someone new. I wasn't rushing into anything, but I had met someone, Emily. She was different from Madison in every way that mattered. She listened. She laughed at my jokes without mocking me. She asked about me, not what I could do for her. I wasn't in love, not yet. but I was open to the possibility of something real. One evening, as I sat on my balcony overlooking the city, my phone buzzed. A message. From Madison. I need to see you. Please. I stared at it for a long time before finally typing back. There's nothing left to say. She responded almost immediately. I just need closure. I made mistakes, but I want to explain. Please. For a moment, I considered ignoring her. But then, I realized something. I wasn't angry anymore. I didn't need to yell at her, to tell her how much she had hurt me, to make her feel the weight of what she had done. I had one. Not in some petty revenge-fueled way, but in the way that actually mattered. I was free, so I agreed to meet her. One last time. She was already at the cafe when I arrived, sitting at a corner table, stirring her coffee absent-mindedly. When she looked up and saw me, her eyes flickered with something I couldn't quite place. Regret? Longing? Defeat? Ryan, she said softly as I sat down. You look good. I nodded, saying nothing. She exhaled. I don't know where to start. Then don't, I said simply. We both know what happened. She winced. I didn't mean to. I held up a hand. Stop. She fell silent. You didn't mean to cheat? I asked, tilting my head. You didn't mean to humiliate me? You didn't mean to throw away everything we built? Her lower lip trembled, but I didn't feel pity. I was selfish, she admitted. I don't know what I thought. She swallowed. I thought you'd always be there. I let out a dry chuckle. And now you're realizing that's not true. She nodded, looking down. I miss you. I leaned back in my chair, studying her. The woman who had once held so much power over me now looked small, lost. You miss having someone who put you first, I corrected. You miss the security, the stability, but you don't miss me. You miss what I gave you. She shook her head quickly. No, Ryan, it doesn't matter, I cut in. I'm not here to argue. You wanted closure? Here it is. I'm done, Madison. Really, truly done. And you know what? I'm happy. Tears welled in her eyes, but I felt nothing. I stood, tossing some cash on the table. Take care of yourself. And just like that, I walked away. She didn't chase me, because she knew, this time, there was no getting me back. That night, as I sat on my balcony again, I felt something I hadn't in years. Peace. Madison's chapter in my life was closed. And for the first time in a long time, I was ready to start the next one where I was finally free. Thank you for listening to the end. I hope you enjoyed it very much. Don't forget to give a like, and tell us in the comments what you would do in such a situation.